Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Ali. How has this experience, this COVID-19 experience, been for you personally?
Well, needless to say, there would have been some changes that were necessary, and that is both personally and professionally. So in terms of my actual work, my professional employment, as a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, I've had to adapt and moving from a face-to-face mode to online mode. Thankfully, I've had quite some experience in it, and coupled with some refresher training mechanisms, and I coordinate a section which is the academic literacies program of the entire campus that deals with the academic writing skills and competencies of students in all their related degrees at the undergraduate level. So we've had to bring on board our staff as well as our student base. So we've been trying. There have been some challenges, but I think our input and our strategies have borne fruit. And I think it's a testimony of both staff and students. On a personal dimension, well, we were all under lockdown and adhering to the measures and the regulations are of paramount importance, both from a personal perspective as well as a familial perspective. So that is being taken care of, and it's basically adapting to what is bandied about now as a new normal. So all in good time, things are working out. Thank you.
I noticed that you put a post. Let me go straight to the meat of the matter. You put a post on Facebook, basically having an idea of readjusting the current timeline in order for us to get at least the system to get back to normal by next year, September, I believe. Can you just give a little more information of what was the idea behind it, and what are the problems that you would be solving moving forward with your idea?
Well, in essence, I put that post on the twofold basis of being an educator for over 31 years with experience at the primary level, secondary, quite aware and deeply familiar with the syllabus of work at various levels of schooling. I also did it as a parent in terms of what I see as a possible plan of action. And all of that was done in light of there being something solid that was being proposed, or if something is being proposed and worked out, which I'm sure is being done behind the scenes, it's not being articulated, not even on a phase basis with the population. And therefore, educators, parents, school administrators, teachers, students are really left in a bit of a vacuum. The post itself must be contextualized in terms of the date that it was done, because to now there would have been some development, albeit minimal, I would think, or at least the sharing of such information has been minimal. Subsequent to the post, there would have been information coming from the region's examining body at SEA, at CSEC, and at Cape level, which is CXC, Caribbean Examinations Council, with a webinar that they had last week that I attended and participated, posed questions and had those things answered, as well as some more shift to online delivery of curriculum. And that is because on the 20th of April would have been the due date for the return of students to public school, public and private, in terms of early childhood, primary and secondary. But subsequent to all of that, and at the point of time that I posted, it would have been born out of as well, one, a lack of information coming to people, and two, discussion and discourse among colleagues, among peers, among friends, and other parents and chat groups in terms of what might be happening and what could be a possible line of action, because, as I said, information was not forthcoming. And it would have been also at an important time. It would have been on the day, the post timing would have been on the day after the Ministry of Education held a news conference, but before Tutor, as the bargaining trade union of teachers, would have met with the Ministry of Education the following day. The post would have gathered an impactful amount of support and a huge base, to the extent where it was shared several times, and also the trade union tutor reached out as well. So there has been a lot of discussion based on it, but I sat logically and put myself in the unenviable position of the Minister of Education to see what could be done, because I think something had to be done. And I felt it made sense with what I said and what I still adhere to. And even given what would have been developed since then, particularly with reference to CXC's almost adamant position about how they are approaching CSEC and CAPE, which are carded for July, mind you, at the time of the post and at the time of the news conference and at the time of tutors meeting, CXC had no such deadlines and time frames. But now we know those are set in stone. So it is even more critical that our Ministry of Education respond. And I won't even say in a timely manner, because if our students are to sit in July, listen, this week we are beginning May. Our students need to know. Our parents need to know. Our teachers who are given online or not given online, but who are assisting me in some other way, need to know. Our school administrators need to know. The psychology of our students is such that it needs to be addressed to let them know what is impending. What if the Ministry of Education is not heeding CXC's decision to have Trinidad and Tobago Nationals sit the exams in July? Again, we need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Two is the lack of information is resounding in all quarters, and there has to be attention to that. So it's even more critical now that we are discussing this item. Right? We are not even touching on SEA or even the school curriculum and the school year just yet in this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I am just saying what is even more crucial, given CXC's mandate about how it is proceeding, and we can discuss that if you want, in terms of paper 1 and SBAs alone, in lieu of the traditional paper 1, paper 2, and SBA, for official assessment and the granting of eventual grades at CSEC and CAPE level.
Mm-hmm. So it seems it's a very, very, very complex and dynamic situation that we're dealing with, especially as it is for educators. Is there a room for technology at this time, or is it that we need to be able to put the attention on managing the virus and setting up, let's say, different points for different plans and strategies, and if it doesn't work out, we're fluid enough to change it, than this, no information, no communication, and we just in a position to receive the data and not do anything about it?
Not at all. In fact, what has been given precedence for the past, let's say 6 to 8 weeks would have been a focus on the coronavirus and this COVID-19 disease. Right? So the ramifications in terms of health, economy, right, tourism, those things have been addressed somewhat, right, to a large extent. But life is not in a linear, boxed fashion. It is a tapestry and a network,
Mm-hmm.
the connections and intersectionalities of all dimensions, inclusive of education. So it is not that the health dimension and the focus on the virus has to be paramount, and when that is exhausted, then we look at other dimensions such as social conditions, such as gender sensitivity, such as education, such as agriculture. Not at all. Everything has to be in unison one with the other, right? And therefore, wait until everything is done for education to take precedence. That is never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Never going to happen, because something and something else will always be the more prominent. But education is, in a functionalist society like ours, the lever of social mobility, and it has to be given its due attention, and it has to be given its attention in a timely manner, which is not being done. There is a space for technology, therefore, in the whole system, right? There has been the discussion about the Ministry of Education having certain online learning platforms, which is information management system, which is excellent and must be rewarded, right? And we must applaud the initiative of the Ministry of Education for that, and the countless teachers who would have contributed to have that platform so that students and teachers can tune in on television or even over the internet and get the related information. However, that is filling a particular niche at a particular point in time. It does not speak to the larger issues of the impending formal assessment in the lives of students, be it at the SEA level, and be it at CSEC level, and be it at CAPE. And also with consideration for connection into tertiary education, what's happening there, right? Technology factors in there, but we need to also invest a little more in terms of giving teachers, let's say, that technological support such that they will be able to carry out their areas. Now, a teacher is schooled in a particular discipline or sets of discipline. At the secondary level, it's a discipline largely. In terms of the primary level, the teachers are general practitioner. But be it at the early childhood education or primary school or secondary school, all teachers and all administrators must be acquainted with the psychology and sociology of education. So education is contextualized, done within a linguistic landscape, done within a cultural landscape, done with attention to the factors that help identify our student body. So a sense of cultural and Caribbean identity are important here. Teachers might be versed in the professional areas of education to know how to assess, how to manage time, how to engage in classroom management, how to assess learning, how to evaluate learning, I should say, right? And they may be invested in knowing their discipline. So they know the content area. So a discipline area is a content area, a professional area is the tools necessary to transmit the content area. Teachers don't necessarily have to be versed in technology. And that may be an indictment in our education system being still colonial and not matching strides with the 21st century student and child who is very well exposed to technology. I mean, even toddlers have the little tablets that they interface with, in a particular social dimension, of course. Right. So the issue there is teachers are versed in their discipline, but not necessarily in the technology to transmit the discipline outside of a face-to-face setting. And they should not have to be versed in that because it was never mandated. It was never part of their job spec. It was never part of their contract. It was never part of their assessment, right? It was never part of their confidential report at the end of the school year, right? Increments, promotion, right? And any sort of longevity is not hinged on that, okay? So teachers need that technical support. Where is the investment by the Ministry of Education providing technical support? There are countless graduates every year from tertiary education and from post-secondary education, right? Institutes that offer an associate degree. And then there are so many private schools that offer related qualifications in terms of computer science or related fields of technology.
Yeah,
Can these people be contracted on a short-term basis to support mechanisms, right, for teachers to assist them in their online delivery? But when you have a teacher who's very well versed in, let's say, literature, and come to give literature, and a student is having difficulty to hear, right? Or you, the teacher, would be having difficulty to share your whiteboard, right? So your students can see the note. It's going to assist the teacher who's very well versed in literary analysis and literary skills, but not the technological support. Why can't there be, right, an immediate short-term hiring of technological support per school, right? So that one or two persons, depending on the student population and the teacher ratio with the students, right, can be attached to these schools. Perhaps far more than that, because there are people, young people out there who need employment, or maybe even OJTs who might be able to fill that void and provide that technological support. So you have the academic and professional dimension going on while you have teachers relying on the technical support. Because many teachers are hesitant to participate, and justifiably so. Because they've never been schooled, because it was never wanted, that they know how to do that. There are certain teachers who on their own make things, but it is not critical for them, right? It was, by the way, that they, or in other contexts, that they would have been exposed to these things.
And it was never a requirement.
It was not, it is not a mandatory requirement.
Yeah.
But now you are, as the Ministry of Education, advising teachers to come and give online classes. Or has not launched any online development workshops or training sessions or seminars for teachers that can assist them or can be a parallel support mechanism for them as they interface with online. As the Ministry of Education issued a list of support personnel, right? I'm asking, to my no, but the point is, why don't I know? Yeah. I'm a member of civil society and I'm a parent, so I am entitled to know, right? So mechanisms have been issued right now to support teachers in getting their work done online. I am saying if teachers have the awareness that there is a support mechanism from that for them, that can be the reprieve that many of them need to assist students right now. So we are talking outside of this about many students do not have the technological resources inclusive of device and internet connectivity, right? Many that do also have it, but it's not being utilized because the teachers have not necessarily been utilizing it for this purpose. So in other words, the Ministry of Education's information system becomes a default mechanism that students with such devices can log on to the Ministry of Education website and access material. But that is not teaching. That is there nonetheless. That is a repository that will always be there.
And it lacks the strategic management behind it too as well, because it's just basically a blanket. It's blanketing information, but it does, as you rightly say in your previous conversation, it doesn't allow for individual learners who are at different learning speed, and there's no formal assessment from the instructor as well. So as you're saying in the past, as far as I remember, this format that they have now is generic, but it probably might be the right strategy for individual learners, which is what education is about. You individually assimilating and understanding information individually. So as you rightly said in the past, as far as I remember, this might just be a blanketing tool, but there needs to be more.
Well, the thing is, there is the need for continuity between the school child and the school teacher. At the primary level, let's say it's a standard 3 child. So the standard 3 child would have ended face-to-face interaction mid-March. And then the student is being advised in mid-April to switch on to online via the Ministry of Education's website. Consider that case for a minute. Then while you are considering that case, consider the student of, let's say, Form 2 history, right, who would have interfaced with his history teacher mid-March, and then all learning stopped, and you're being asked in April or later April to switch to the Ministry of Education's website. In both cases, and therefore they come to represent every single student, there's a lack of continuity, right, with that syllabus. There's a lack of timely feedback because over a month would have passed, right, and now that student has to catch back himself or herself. SEA having been shelved from April 2nd to until when we don't know is another problem area, right? The fact that students were supposed to have done oral examinations in the languages at CSEC is not being allowed to do his or her CAPE examinations in May, June is another area. But there's one last difficulty, which would be post-secondary education. What we have to understand is a secondary education is really 5 years of education. After Form 5, the student who enters lower 6 doesn't continue with secondary school education. The student continues at post-secondary. Form 6 is considered post-secondary, right? Now, that student is doing CAPE, post-secondary education, largely to enter tertiary education. Not absolutely, but largely to enter tertiary. What happens with the tertiary system? Are we going to have an intake of students at universities come September? And if so, on what qualifying criteria when the student who sat CAPE, who was supposed to sit CAPE, did not sit CAPE to enter in September? So I'm trying to say it is problematic. The problems lie along a continuum, but the problems are interrelated. Far more important than the problems is the possible resolution to these issues and the possible solution. And that is what I am interested in, right? What I'm interested in is finding a way that this could work out, right? And to me, there is a plan of action. May I get into that now?
Yeah.
Okay, but basically I'm saying, let's consider the fact that all schools, largely public schools, but it's supposed to be public and private schools because Trinidad and Tobago has 2 schools, public and private. All schools at any level, right, early childhood and care, elementary, right, secondary and tertiary would have shut down face-to-face classes in mid-March. Some universities picked up immediately or a week after or 2 weeks later, the transition from face-to-face into online. So there's a continuation of the curriculum. Secondary schools and primary schools did not jump on that bandwagon for many reasons. Many of what we articulated before in terms of teacher readiness, lack of ministry information, lack of communication, lack of ministry position, and the whole ambiguous and nebulous nature of CXC not saying yet what would have been done. In all fairness to everybody, this virus is nobody's responsibility in terms of its causal factors as it attacks on us, but it is something that we all have to grapple with. So give Jack his jacket, everybody has to consider what's the best course of action. But my bee in the bonnet is, at this point in time, 27th of April, is enough time for there to be an articulated plan of action that affects the lives of thousands and thousands of students. Now let's come back to the actual problems. I am proposing, and I'll take one by one. Let's take the school year, because we are speaking to the majority of hundreds of thousands of students. A child normally spends at least a year, perhaps 2, in an early childhood care and education environment. At the age of 5 until 11 or 12, in 7 years, that child goes to a primary school, right? Then that child moves on to a secondary school. We're talking about the mainstream society. Child goes on to a secondary school for 5 years, maybe 7 if you include Cape, which will be Form 6 with 2 years. Then the child moves on to tertiary education, maybe with girls in between to catch themselves up to have qualifying passes and all of that or whatever. The point is that is the trajectory that we have inherited from our colonial system. And then, right, in the absence of no face-to-face schooling, the child's education as they know it in terms of a manifest curriculum, working with their discipline teachers in secondary school and their class teachers at the primary level have been stunted, right? School is closed this term, right? But this term is the 3rd term and it's a short term, 10 weeks, but it means 10 weeks of no schooling. Every online class that is being done, now at every level, must consider the fact that there are students who are going to be missing out on information, right? Therefore, I am saying what is being done now this term cannot replace what would have been done in a face-to-face manner, because there is not enough resources or time, right, or manner of approach for teachers to follow, for parents to partner with teachers to follow, and for the student to assimilate fully and become fully aware of the concepts, right? I am thinking what is being done now online can very well be a reiteration of what should have been done when school ended in the face-to-face mode, or even review, or even if you introduce concepts, it would be remiss of any teacher to believe that they are reaching all their students with new content matter, when we know for a fact, right, the sociological context of our students, and we know they are students without the resources. And even if you are reaching the student, does it mean that you have been able to assess the students learning in the concepts that you are teaching, ways that you would have done in the face-to-face mode? I'm saying all of that is predicated on that whole notion of the Ministry of Education not having created that springboard to support teachers in their endeavors, okay? Now, any teaching that is going on now cannot replace what would have been face-to-face, because you're not reaching everybody and you're not teaching everybody in the same way. I would therefore want to propose this then. All things being equal, we are looking at a reopening of the school in September. All right? If school reopens in September, then we are looking at what was supposed to have been done when school shut down in mid-March until the start of the Easter vacation, and then the end of the Easter vacation until the July week when school closes. So we are looking at about 13 weeks of schooling. What do we do then? And I'm contextualizing again, I'm speaking to early childhood, primary, from standards 1 to 4 and secondary from forms 1 to 4 who are not sitting a summative SEA, CSEC, or CAPE exam.
For promotion, yeah.
Itself, right? I am proposing that in September, when September begins, a school year, any year, is 39 teaching weeks. September to December is 15 teaching weeks. January to, let's say, March, right, is between 13 and 14 teaching weeks. And after the Easter vacation, like where we would have been now, would be 10 to 11 teaching weeks. Let's look at the September term. You have 15 teaching weeks, right? Carry across this term's work into that 15 teaching weeks. Now, mind you, what is a traditional term of work? If a term is 10 weeks, largely this term, it's really only 8 weeks of teaching, because the 9th week is done for term tests.
Evaluation.
The 10th week is done for release of results, promotion lists, issuing book lists, getting the child ready to move up into another class or into another form. Okay. So it's 8 weeks of teaching. Let that 8 weeks of teaching be done in September. Okay. Now, if those 8 weeks of teaching are transferred to September, then what is happening would be whatever teachers do online now would serve as reinforcement for some students during those 8 weeks in September.
Yeah.
For some students, it's brand new information because they've not been exposed to online. So it becomes concept lessons. Okay. For some students who have been exposed to online but didn't catch the concept, it would serve as reinforcement or enrichment. For other students, it's review of content. And for other students, it's evaluative and problem-solving lessons. In the education system, there are 6 types of lessons: concept, review, application, problem solving, evaluation, enrichment. And these can be the types of experiences the students have during those 8 weeks, such that by the 8th week, every single child, whether they were exposed to online work now or not, would be up to standard. At the end of the 8 weeks, during that 15 weeks, what happens? Do they get the term test? No. In order for this plan of action to work for 1 year, not even a year, but for 2 terms of that 1 year, the Ministry of Education has to consider this very entrenched colonial mentality when it comes to summative testing, which is called tests. Get rid of that term test. If a teacher is worth his or her salt, and there are teachers who are, they would be able to evaluate learning during those 8 weeks of teaching in September and October, right? And that is by formative evaluation. So I don't need a summative test. Just oral questioning in the classroom, just homework activities, just in-class quizzes and essays and sums, right? Just little field trips will help me to know that my students have learned. I do not need to expose them to the traditional pencil and paper tests to determine whether you have learned. I can assess your learning on an ongoing formative basis without the need for a 2-week, 1-week term test and then having to mark. And therefore, I will capitalize on additional teaching time.
Yeah.
So after my 8 weeks, I have 7 more weeks, right? For the term, let's just say it's not 7, but 6, because the last week, of course, you want to give the students their end of term or Christmas party experience or whatever.
Yeah.
But in those 6 weeks coming after my 7, coming after my 8, during those 6 weeks, I'm still not going to do any summative or term tests at the end. But you see, those 6 weeks, those would have been 6 weeks of what would have been the manifest syllabus of that term 1, right? Term 1 is 15 weeks, largely, right? 13 weeks of teaching will go on and 2 weeks for term tests and marking.
Yeah.
Those 13 teaching weeks, right? I take 8 for this current April to July syllabus. And 13 minus 8 is 5. I would have done 5 weeks out of the September term work and even an additional week to make it my 14 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I want to term 2, which was January to March, and I follow the same principle. Because I am not doing summative evaluation at the end of that term either. I'm doing formative learning, formative evaluation to make sure my students learn, right? Such that I maximize teaching weeks again. right? And by the end of that term, I go on to term 3, which will be April to July, which is what we are in now, right? And there's where I fill the void. I fill the void by finishing my teaching, and it is in July, end of June, beginning of July, I have a summative evaluation to assess learning. So the September...
And that evaluation will also help towards promotion too as well, the summative evaluation.
It will be, because even now, virus or no virus, child performance in those term tests is supposed to factor in promotion, because a child is supposed to be promoted based on readiness and not on age.
Yeah.
So it even factors in more critically then. I am saying with this plan of action, if we do some teeth here and there, right, and some sort of emendation, right, we can very well have what would have been this current April to July terms work plus the academic years come work being done in 1 year. But that is predicated on there being no summative evaluation at the end of December and at the end of March. Mm-hmm. It's formative evaluation, because I am saying formative evaluation is a bona fide, educationally sound industry practice in assessing learning. It's just because we have a colonial mentality to have a term test and have reports and have ranking students in terms of norm referencing and all of that. Formative evaluation can show and can point to the children's then deficiencies and challenges. Then those are the things that can be addressed in real ways, right? And parents will adapt, and teachers will adapt, and the student will adapt, because it becomes a new norm, just as how we all adapt to whatever becomes. So it can work in terms of that approach. So I've looked at the first major problems that will speak to the majority of the hundreds of thousands of students at the preschool level, standards 1 to 4, of primary, and then 4 years, forms 1 to 4 at secondary. Which brings me to the other hurdle, which is SEA. Now, SEA was supposed to be done on April 2nd. There is no way that child who is 11 years old, who is infinitely malleable and still needs that sort of guidance, and that's the difference between the word pupil and student. At the primary school, we have primary school pupils. At secondary school, we have students, because pupils still needs a heavy abundance of guidance and interaction with a teacher, as opposed to a student who could be relied on to do a lot of work on his or her own, right? But the age of the child and the psychology of the child is important, and that psyche is affected already. The SEA has to go on, but only after school reopens. So if school reopens in September, you need at least a month for many things. The teacher has to bring back that child up to a certain speed, because the child could be doing whatever the child is doing to maximize learning at home. Mm-hmm. The competitive environment in the SEA class factors in. The lack of the dynamic nature of the everyday use of correction and answering and that kind of thing is missing as well. And therefore, that needs to be done in September to bring that child up to speed. Likewise, the Ministry of Education can use September to put its mechanisms in place for the SEA. So the child can very well sit that SEA at the end of September, use October to mark scripts, use this November to place students, and the school term can very well begin. The one school term can begin in January. It means the secondary schools will simply have to adapt during that term to ensure what goes on in January. So Form 1 begins in January. All right. There can be a merging of the curriculum in Form 1, right? Because you will be exposing the Form 1 child to 2 terms from January to March, and then from April to July. 2 terms of work. If we get 2.5 terms work of Form 1 there, the 1/2 remaining term of Form 1 can be done in the beginning of Form 2 in September next year. At the point in time when the Ministry of Education held its news conference, right, they also weren't certain about CSEC. Well, they weren't certain about everything, basically, and I guess with good cause. But since then, and this was only last week, CXC, as the examining body that the Ministry of Education has contracted for its examinations, would have issued what they are doing. Now, CXC is saying that it has borne fruit now what would have been an initial plan a few weeks and even months ago, maybe 2 months ago, it was articulated by the CXC examining body at a webinar across the region last week, which stated that at the CSEC level, most of the disciplines are going to be assessed using a paper 1, which is an MCQ, multiple choice questions format, full stop, and the school-based assessment, SBE, okay? Traditionally, there would have been the paper 1 and the SBE, but also a paper 2. Paper 2 really is the written paper. So for example, English A, there would be 4 sections and students have to write an argumentative essay, narrative essay, report writing, and a summary. Or even in literature, there would have been the use of different texts in drama, prose, poetry, and drama, Caribbean and non-Caribbean. But the multiple choice question, and that's paper 1, is only, right, multiple choice, objective type, A, B, C, or D, you choose. Now, there are different schools of thought about the value of multiple choice. Multiple choice has its value, but multiple choice as the sole entity, albeit in conjunction with a school-based assessment, but a school-based assessment is really done in groups and is also assessed by the teacher largely, and its scores are submitted. Now, sample scores are submitted. CXC has determined that all scores for all students will be submitted. That does not erase the fact that it was group work. Some members have worked, some may not have worked, but a mark would have been earned. And that coupled with a student's performance in MCQ, which largely, as you would know, could very well be guesswork. And that is why SEA replaced common entrance, because common entrance was objective type. SEA, the student had to show their thought processes and working to arrive at an answer.
Yeah.
Right? So if CSEC is going with multiple choice and paper and SBA alone, then that is CXC's decision. CXC has said that is how we'll be going. CXC is so adamant that they are also saying these exams will take place in July. On top of that, CXC is saying within 2 weeks, and last week they said that, so this is 1 week, next week is the second week. Within 2 weeks, they are going to issue timetables for these examinations. So in other words, CXC is going ahead.
Yeah.
The fact that CXC is going ahead means our Ministry of Education is lagging behind.
Yeah.
They are not saying, they are not responding to what CXC has said. They are not edifying schools or teachers. The students are in a vacuum. Parents don't know what to do. Because if our children are sitting that CSEC exam, albeit multiple choice and SBA to be assessed, in July, then we need to know to prepare our children.
Yeah.
If the Ministry of Education is saying, no, we are not buying into it, CXC is going that way, but we are not, therefore, what is the alternative Ministry of Education? Are you saying that we will now have our Form 5 students sit CSEC in January, because CSEC by CXC is offered both in January and May, June.
Yeah.
Right? So if you sit in January, then you have to revert. This is January 2021. Mm-hmm. So you revert to paper 1, paper 2, and SBA. Okay? But the Ministry of Education has to guide us all. The entire national community must know what's happening. Because if our students are to sit in January, then we will know there is no promotion to come with Form 4s into Form 5s. Then we will also know these Form 5s who have to sit in January cannot do CAPE come September.
Yeah.
But if the Ministry of Education is saying, well, yes, CXC is determined it's paper 1 and SBA, and those are sufficient skills to assess learning, then by all means, let us know so we will be prepared. So we will know if Form 5 can go into Form 6 come September, and the Form 4s can go into Form 5 come September. On the other side of things, CXC might have to take some flack for being somewhat lazy. Mm-hmm. Although they are going with paper 1 and SBA, you are simply dissolving the merit of paper 2. Therefore, if you can award a grade based on paper 1 and SBA, then of what value at all and of what academic integrity at all is paper 2 ever? Because the student who sits CSEC now will graduate with a grade. In time to come, that grade will just be a grade. It wouldn't matter when you sat the exam, but it will be comparative with other students all the years before and all the years after who must do a paper 1 and paper 2. So how could that stand up to scrutiny? What is the integrity? But I have the solution for CXC as well. CXC could have exercised due diligence, and the paper 2 skills and competencies could have been translated into MCQ questions, and therefore make that MCQ paper 1 more worthwhile, more definitive and more depictive of academic rigor that is necessary for that discipline to stand up to scrutiny. CXC has dropped the ball in that respect. So CXC could have amended and catered for those skills and competencies, because at the end of the day, a student is to achieve certain objectives and leave with skills and competencies. The invisibilization of the paper 2 has absorbed those skills and competencies, and therefore it's a watered down grade that is going to be earned with only the traditional paper 1. Mind you, I should say CXC is saying it is the traditional customary paper 1. There are no amendments to it. So the paper 2 skills and competencies are not at all factored in CXC this year. All right? Perhaps that's what the Ministry of Education is looking at, but whatever they are doing, they need to respond and respond forthwith to guide every stakeholder in education at this point in time. Now, much the same will carry to the fourth problem of CAPE. Okay? So if CAPE is being assessed with a paper 1 and what would have been SBA as well, which is the former IE, internal assessment, that is now school-based assessment, the same principle goes on. The fifth and last problem I want to draw attention to is universities. Universities that have traditionally relied on CAPE as a matriculation requirement for a 3-year degree, or CSEC as a matriculation requirement for a certificate at the university, or for a 4-year degree elsewhere. Now, what is the university going to do? How is the university going to get an intake? That is the problem. Now, you know, CAPE is a Unit 1 and a Unit 2 examination. Word of caution here. Now, I'm not pinpointing any universities because I've not been privy to their plans, but if a university is saying, well, let us take 1 unit of work for entry. In times gone by, 1 unit of work is only going to give a student provisional entry. It's provided you sit and pass your 2nd unit, then you get entry, okay? Which will be maintaining that academic integrity as standard of education as all the years gone by, whether it was CSEC CAPE, whether CXC CAPE or GCE advanced level, okay? It's a 2-year program of work. A 2-year program of work that is post-secondary equips the student with skills and perspectives and know-how and outlook, so they could grapple successfully with tertiary level education. But if, let's say, universities say we will take the student who has reached 1 unit of work, in other words, then the incoming student would not have had a chance to sit CAPE and get the 2nd unit of work, right? So if the universities take 1 unit of work, there's a host of problems there. Namely, if 1 unit of work is sufficient for matriculation, then why on earth did you ever want 2 units of work? The second issue is, if 1 unit of work is necessary, are you telling the student now, just because you want to have a university student body, are you telling the student to stop their secondary school, their post-secondary education, curtail CAPE because you're getting in now? But the point is, you have an incomplete CAPE qualification, and that has to be addressed. The thing is, what about students who get in? Let's say a student is only doing CAPE to go UE, or to go to UTT, or University of Southern Caribbean, or any others. What about that student who jumps at the opportunity of going UE, or UTT, or USC, or elsewhere, fulfills their year 1 requirement, which is whichever degree they are doing, that they have a B average, and then they can transfer to the major that they really want to do? What if that major is in medical sciences or in engineering, and that student enters with 1 CAPE, 1 unit of CAPE, and not the other one? Then how ready is that student to continue with work? I think you are setting up a student for failure, or for disappointment, when you take 1 unit of work. The fourth problem with that is there are some schools, albeit in a minority, that will do their 2 units of work at the end of year 2. Because with CAPE, you could do 1 unit, be it unit 1 or unit 2, at the end of year 1, and then the other unit 1 or unit 2, at the end of year 2. There are some schools that opt to do units 1 and 2 at the end of year 2. Those students are at a disadvantage now. They could never, on what basis can they go to university now? Are they prepared educationally, and are they sufficiently mature to handle tertiary level education just with 1 year of work at CAPE? not two. What is going to happen to the academic rigor of the university program? What is going to happen with the success rate of these students? And my seventh and final problem with that system is not all students sitting CAPE are sitting to go to a local university. Many will apply to a local university, but as a backup mechanism. Many are going to try for scholarships, or even those without scholarships would opt to be university educated elsewhere. Those foreign universities are not going to lower down their matriculation requirements because they are well sought after and they have more applicants than spaces. Mm-hmm. They have more applicants than spaces. Could you understand the Trinidad and Tobago national who does not complete CAPE but who is expecting to go to a foreign university because our local university has diluted the matriculation requirements? All right. So all of these are serious considerations, and the university, I also have a plan of action for them. Let us say CAPE, the Ministry of Education, buys into CSEC's plan for CAPE to take place in July, albeit a paper 1 MCQ and an SBE. The results are going to be released in August because with this type of marking, be it CSEC or CAPE, multiple choice is done by the computer. The CXC is saving a lot of money because they don't have to contract markers and they don't have to pay stipends because the computer is going to mark all these things as MCQ. All right? But let's say the results are released in time for August, then all is well in September. But is the university prepared to advise its teaching staff to be aware that the students who are coming in will be coming in without the benefit of that paper 2 skills and competencies in CAPE and CSEC? And what then are the plans of action to implement that buffer that might be necessary to bring the student up to scratch? Or let us say the universities accept students with 1 unit of work. Apart from the whole dimension of it being unfair and prejudice against other students who are sitting units 1 and 2 at level 2, at year 2 in CAPE. Let's say you accept them with only 1 unit of work, right? What mechanism is there in place? Now, that can very well serve as a lower matriculation requirement and have a 4-year degree. Mm-hmm. Take students in with 1 unit of work, but the resolution to that is expose them to a 4-year degree instead of a 3-year. It is the same time frame. The student would have spent 2 years at CAPE and 3 years at undergrad. Mm-hmm. So if it's at CAPE, let it be 4 years at undergrad. And that first year could be a buffer year. So you teach them generic skills, general skills in academic, in literacy and numeracy and their discipline to bring them up to standard. So there will be a seamless transition. But that is if the university can do a 4-year degree, which they can if they consider it carefully.
Mm-hmm. And then it would be a temporary situation anyway, because
it is only for 1 year.
Yeah,
it's only for 1 year. But the point is, it's a workable solution.
And it benefits the clients, which are the students.
Plus, way beyond any gain is that a university that has to have quality assurance can stand up to scrutiny that it is a quality set of programs you're offering. Mm-hmm. Plus, student who benefits from that sort of arrangement will then graduate and can hold their head high that their degree is as rigorous, right, as the degree read by students before and students who are to come. Yeah. Because they've been given, if not the same, additional tuition. But I want to go to my final solution. Let's say the Ministry of Education says we are not taking CXC's paper 1 and SBE for CSEC and CAPE, but rather Trinidad and Tobago school nationals would do the examination in January. Right? Sorry, not January, in December. So school reopens in September. The student is given that additional time to get yourself in order, to get back at the state of readiness, to sit the examinations, right? October, November, results come out in December, right? And therefore the university can have semester 1 of year 1 in January to April, right? So whereas it would have been semester 2, it is really semester 1 for that incoming cohort of students only. I'm saying the student who gets the result in December, CAPE results, can begin semester 1 at the university, whichever university it is, right? Once the university is structuring its approach like this, to have the students begin semester 1 in January and end it in April. Semester 2 begins in May and ends in July or August, right? Such that by the time September comes around, the student goes into year 2, level 2 of their degree. And because of the compressed time, they can even be given a 2-week reprieve and start, let's say, mid-September instead of early September, right? Because learning has to be structured as well, and you cater for revival of the student then, right? But if the university does semester 1 in January to April, that's if there's a need that's predicated on the students sitting, getting CAPE results in December, having sat CAPE late. Only if that happens. But the university, you see, I think all universities need to have a plan of action that is not one alternative, but a plan of action with several options. The university should have several options right now, such that whatever situation presents itself, they adapt to suit. So if semester 1 takes place from January to April, and I'm talking only for the incoming year, then semester 2 takes place May to August. The university can very well contract short-term workers, part-time teachers to get the program running, because university staff would have been delivering semester 1 to year 2, year 3, year 4 students normally from September to December, and semester 2 to year 2, year 3, year 4 students from January to May. So for the new incoming student, the university can very well look at its coffers, loosen its purse strings, hire part-time person. These people do. So it can be done. There are major problems. There are major problems with the whole education system at this point in time, but there are plans of action, there are possible solutions, and that is what I have proposed. It can be done, and remember, it is very temporary. It is for a year. By next year, September, every single education level falls back in line with its traditional approach in terms of timing. I would want to add one thing though. This is a brilliant opportunity for the Ministry of Education to come out of that slumber and match strides with 21st century educational practices, the way other developing countries have done, like Singapore, and the way developed countries have in the education system. It is an opportunity that presents itself for the Ministry of Education to consider with the right mix of people need to factor in, to brainstorm, to think, or else our students and our nation at large will always be left behind.
And with that, Tyrone, I want to say thank you. We have been bombarded with some of the facts, and also I think one of the points that you made, and we could see that with the technology, is the fact that not everybody have access to technology like this. And look, we're doing a simple conversation with just 2 people, and the internet isn't as reliable as it should be. So you can imagine if you have a classroom with, let's say, 25 or 30 students, and one student don't have the connection, well, then that leaves up.
Or one teacher.
Or a teacher.
Or one teacher. Yeah, so magnify that by 25 or by 35. Yeah, because that's 35 to 40 students in a class. And
then if actually the compound issues that may be involved. But I want to say thank you. There's a lot of information. I hope that there are people who would watch the entire vidcast and understand the depth of the conversation and be able to take away the pertinent information for themselves, the families, and their own learning going forward. Thank you, Tyrone, for taking that time.
Based on what you've said, that is the spirit in which it is imparted, because I'm just looking at a problem-solving approach to what is a serious situation that is affecting hundreds of thousands of people at all levels, right? So I'm trusting that it be assessed in that spirit, and I want to thank you as well for giving me this opportunity to share this information. Thank you so much.
No problem, Tyrone.